Hi, this is Tracy, Totally Not Taboo, where we talk about everything that is taboo around sex and sexuality. So welcome to another episode. Today I have Candice Chirwa, the Minister of Menstruation, as my very, very special guest. Mm-hmm. And being the Minister of Menstruation, I'm sure you are very, very busy. So I am very privileged and honored to have you here with us. So I'm going to introduce you.
Sure.
So Candice is an author, gender activist, and thought leader, better known as the Minister of Menstruation. Her activism is led by the belief that women and girls deserve fundamental human rights. This has informed her academic background as she educates the youth on menstruation, promotes eduliftment with award-winning NGO Curate. Candice is well known for being able to take social topics and influence people to speak openly about issues and empower themselves. She is on a mission to fiercely change the disempowering narrative around menstruation. Candice has been invited to speak on periods on platforms such as TEDx, Nedbank, Charlotte Manya Maxeke Institute, Oprah Winfrey School, African Women in Dialogue, and others.
Yeah.
And I also want to just add in this incredible, monumental achievement here, that you have been added to a list of 30 exceptional women at Constitutional Hill.
Yeah.
You will see Candice's name there, of the amazing woman between 1994 and 2024 as one of the most exceptional 30 women in the country.
I'm still in disbelief about that one.
Wow.
I'm not going to lie. Like, it's incredible to be honored by an institution that had the women's jail, where they were fighting for democratic South Africa. And when you then think about their realities menstruating in the women's jail,
sure.
It's like a full circle moment for me, because we're still experiencing period poverty in democratic South Africa. So it's an incredible achievement where I'm still like, I'm in disbelief. Thank you for reading the bio.
Wow.
It's a long one. Only being 28, I think sometimes I go, sheesh.
Wow. What an incredible achievement.
Thank you.
And I'm really feeling so honored that you've agreed to be my guest today. Really. Can you please explain period poverty?
Sure. I always explain it in the space of what's relatable, I think, for what everyone uses. So in the case of, if you didn't have access to toilet paper every day, what would you use? And oftentimes people would say, I would use an old rag or old clothes just as a way to manage my natural function. And I said, well, apply that in the context of menstrual health, where once a week, once a month, we are literally going through this uterine lining being shed, and we need access to this necessity item, but yet society has classified it as a luxury item. And then when we don't have access to those period products, then we have to use makeshift alternatives. So whether that's old rags, old cloths, in certain contexts, girls would use old socks. These are things, newspaper, leaves. These are things that are not designed to absorb menstrual blood. And when you're using these old materials, it can create future health implications. So that's just one aspect of that. Not having access to the period products causes an anxiety for a lot of young girls who are trying to go to school, trying to, be social, that they have to then isolate themselves. But then when you add a different layer to it, where we look at the access to water, where we need to wash our hands after we've changed our period product. We need a flushing toilet. These are things that, again, a lot of communities don't have access to. So then it becomes multi-layered. So it becomes, okay, not access to period products, not access to water. It then has a major impact on your dignity. And that is an infringement of your human rights. So as menstrual rights activists, we are then calling to say menstrual rights are human rights, because if a girl can't go to school because of her period, which is a natural biological function, that has a major ability on her future. We've seen from a business point of view that when girls are educated and empowered and they go to school and they further their studies, that contributes to the economy's GDP. So if we're not tapping into girl empowerment by ensuring that they're constantly going to school through period poverty, that is something that we need to be tackling. So yeah, there's a lot about period poverty that people tend to assume, okay, let's just throw pads and then the problem will be solved. But it's like, okay, look at the access, the state of infrastructure. A lot of girls go to schools with pit latrines. A lot of girls don't have access to water. Then if we solve that issue, then it's a thing of, okay, but what if there's a girl who has a period condition like endometriosis or PCOS? How does she get access to medical care? Oftentimes when they go to a clinic system that's overburdened, they feel that waiting for a very long time to get access to those necessary services becomes a challenge, an obstacle, and so they just leave it till the very last minute, right? Then we look at the case of education. If a girl starts her period at the age of 8, not knowing a single thing because no one's had the conversation with her, that becomes an isolating time. So it's a multifaceted element around period poverty that people are only speaking about from a period product perspective, and not the access to water, access to education, access to medical care. And then it gets much deeper when we look at it from a societal, cultural, religious point of view. Because like you mentioned earlier, it's a taboo in many societies. A lot of societies feel that girls must isolate themselves through a practice of going into a menstrual hut. And these menstrual huts are not glamorous. It's not like you're going into an Airbnb and you've got a staycation. It's not a spa. There's no ventilation. It's just be in the space. And there have been girls in Nepal and India specifically who have died just trying to keep themselves warm due to smoke inhalation, or have experienced animal attacks, or have even experienced sexual violence, because people in the community know that once a month they can expect a girl to be in that hut that is very far from the community. So this again becomes a multi-layered human rights issue that I feel society is only scraping the surface level about. Yeah.
Wow, so
it's a
much.
mouthful, I'm sorry.
No, so much to think about, and so wide. And so I'm coming in also from an emotional perspective,
Sure.
Guilt and shame around a period, and what, heaven forbid, you should bleed through your panties and onto your skirt at school.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when we have these clueless boys making comments and the shame that girls have to go through. And then what about the lack of support from their main caregivers? Let's say it's a mother or it's another caregiver. How much support is there out there?
I'm going on the personal experience that when I started my period at 10, what I initially thought my cramps were was because that day I had eaten a lot of candy. It was like a cake and candy day. So I had so much cake and candy. I was like, oh, my tummy is so sore. I must just drink water. And I drank a lot of water. And when I got back and I was in the bathroom, I just remember wiping and seeing blood. And I'm going, what is going on? It was I think as a 10-year-old, that was probably the first panic attack I've ever had. Because I was just panicking. I went up into my bedroom. I just remember every hour or so, I'd just be changing the toilet paper that I put in the underwear. And then when my mom got home, I was like, Mom, I'm bleeding. And I think she could tell, okay, this is it. She had a conversation with me to say, this is what's happening. You have a period. It happens once a month. When you feel like you're in pain, you can take painkillers, but you must change your pad. And when you change your pad, make sure the way you dispose of it, no one sees it. Make sure that the way you wear your pad is that you don't stain it because you don't want other people to see. And I think that emphasis on no one should see it, no one should see, made me feel like I'm the only one that's going through this. And I can't speak openly to my friends about this. Even when I was in high school, and it being a very Catholic high school, menstruation was seen as Eve's curse. So you weren't even allowed to go to church on your period. But I still went to church on my period. I guess that was my way of being a rebel. But having those stigmas there, and from an early age of 10, carrying that through within a high school setting, really made me terrified. I also just didn't like my period. I had a very negative relationship towards my period only until I turned 21. And I think it's because I was in a more critical thinking institution where you were challenged to be open-minded that then my perspective on my period changed. And a lot of young girls don't have that opportunity of having that critical thinking opportunity to shift that narrative and saying, okay, I didn't like my period now, but because I know of what it is, what I go through, I can see it in a better light. They didn't have that opportunity. And so for me, when I was 21, I said, how do we then make that opportunity possible? How do we then shift that narrative to say, when a girl has her first period, it's not, she's terrified, it's not met with fear, but it's actually, okay, this is what's happening, and I'm ready for this. And yeah, I think there's just a huge gap that's not being addressed. I think from a parent's point of view, parents assume that teachers will have these conversations with their kids, but no, teachers, remember, have a rubric and a framework, and they have to go according to what the term says.
So just going back to the conversation that you had with your mother, you were lucky. You were one of the lucky ones, whose mom actually took the time to say, well, this is what's happening to your body. And as you know, I have heard that, so there's a funny tradition in the Jewish community, you know, and I think I shared this with you last time when we spoke, is that when a young girl gets her period, the mom slaps them across the face.
Sure.
And that is so that we should be rosy-cheeked and feel alive forever. Like that's kind of the impression that we should be, because when you have your period, you're drained of blood.
Sure.
So it's like a slap on the face. Welcome to womanhood. May you be blushful as a blushful bride, and bring children. Oh, that's exactly what it is. It's may you be blushful as a bride, bring children, fertility, and also bring some color into your face because you might be looking a bit pale. So we've kind of like, I did it to my girls as well, you know, but obviously not a slap. But I warned them before, darling, I'm going to do this to you now. But there have been stories when all of a sudden, you know, you get this slap on the cheek and what did I do? What?
Surely the uterus giving me cramps is enough pain. I'm just like, can't that just be the signifier? That's so fascinating. I've heard of very interesting ones where in certain they'll give you like, I can't remember what it is to drink. In certain, I remember on Twitter some lady said when her first period came, her mom gave her like a raw egg to drink, and I was like, I feel like your mom just is having a bad day because I don't know may
she produce many eggs?
Probably that's the signifier. But I think having, I guess, a more positive approach to when a young girl starts her period needs to be the norm. I know in Western society they have period parties. So when a girl starts her period, they all come in pajamas, and then they're all just giving her the menstruating girl like all tips and knowledge of like, this is what you use, this is what you use. And I think that's something we can normalize here. I think it's something that parents should do, because back to the point about parents assuming teachers, there's a missing gap.
Yeah.
The only way, like, how menstruation is covered within a school setting is what happens every 21 to 35 days in the menstrual cycle. And then that's it. It doesn't speak about the symptoms, the self-care you need. It doesn't talk about interpersonal relationships when you're menstruating, because that's also a whole different dynamic. When you start dating and then you have to bring up Aunt Flo, like, yeah, you're going to be dating me, but Aunt Flo is also going to be a monthly visitor.
Yeah.
I dropped so many period puns there. Aunt Flo is, I'm going to use that on a first date now. Shout out Candice. Aunt Flo is going to be a monthly visitor. And how are we going to navigate this? It means you should expect when my luteal phase comes in, which is also known as PMS, I'm going to be a bit moody and I'm not going to be as communicative, but it means I need you to be supportive. And a lot of us are not having those conversations with our partners.
There's so much coming up for me,
Yeah.
Candice. So the one thing that comes up for me, firstly, is that I cannot stand it when men say, are you premenstrual? Are you having your period? So it's kind of like we need to educate men as well. And unfortunately for men, they don't feel the pain of period. They also don't feel the pain of birth. And I say unfortunately because we are really gifted with these beautiful bodily experiences that are all around a life source.
Sure.
And the other thing that I was thinking is that the same conversations that the mothers should be having with their girls is also the same conversations that they should be having about sex.
Yes.
Right? That this is the body's way of working when it comes to your menstrual cycle. This is the way your body works, and thank goodness that it works the way it does. It means you're going to be able to have babies. And having that talk with your teenage girls around sex, that your body is a pleasurable space, and that it is not only built for having babies, but it's also built for experiencing a lot of pleasure.
And that's so, I think, so empowering in a sense of coming from a Catholic background, you were only taught that you're created for procreation. And for me, in the space of becoming a menstrual activist, you also then come across conversations around period sex, and you're like, whoa, okay, these two taboo things happening all in once. What are we saying? And yes, I think parents need to realize that they can be the safe space for their children to constantly be having conversations. Because in as much as I appreciate my mom for the conversation we had, it just felt like I was in trouble. She sat me across from her, and it's like, okay, usually when you sit me across from it's to discipline me or reprimand me, and so I felt like I was being reprimanded for something that was not in my control. I feel that parents should be enabling these safe spaces to say, okay, if you ever want to speak about this and this and this, you can. And also admitting that you won't know everything, but telling your children that we can learn and research together, empowering them and equipping them with the necessary, I wouldn't even say, the tools to then know that what they go through, especially with puberty, is normal, with the feelings that they'll feel, the wet dreams that they'll have, it's normal. And in the context of menstrual health, I think it's just something that parents need to just feel that when you are speaking about periods, you don't need to have a sexual conversation about it. I think parents often assume, okay, if I'm talking about where the blood comes from the vagina, automatically I have to talk about birds and bees. And it's like, there's a way in which you can speak about menstrual health. Even at Curate, what we do is we explain the menstrual cycle process without any form of sexual intercourse, right? And
so tell me more about Curate, where it comes from, the name, etc., etc.
Sure. The name Curate really, I think, when I think of it, I was very bored. I was just procrastinating from my master's, and I was just coming up with different names. And I think the keyword that just kept coming up for me was curating, but the way you actually spell it, like C-U-R-A-T. Curating critical thinkers, because I was like, what the mission is to allow young people to leave a space where they are critical thinkers. So we're curating that space. And I remember just telling my brother that word. I was like, we're just curating this, and he was just like, why do you keep on saying curate? And I'm like, I think that's the name. And he's like, and he's like, but it's going to be weird to spell it. And I said, I'm going to just youthify it and make it like Qrate. So that's how the name came about. But the reason why I created Curate was at the time I was doing my master's, and I felt very frustrated. Academia is a space that is great for creating knowledge, but never great in implementing that knowledge in solutions. And I felt Curate is that. So taking the research, the knowledge from experts, and then sort of transforming that into a space where we can have workshops or we can have content that is easily accessible for young people to gather and be empowered on. So when I look back on when I started Curate as a 21-year-old versus now, I'm thinking, yeah, this is a bigger organization. It's beyond me. And I'm very grateful for it. I think the consistency of the passion of wanting to provide a period positive spaces around the country has really resonated with a lot of people. Even so, to the extent that we have a team, and the team are incredible young people who just do it so much better than I do, honestly. And I appreciate them for that. So for me, it's gotten to a point where I'm like, I want this organization to outlive me. And I want it to be a space where it can be a household name for people to speak openly about menstrual health and be a go-to resource for anything sexual and reproductive health matters. So yeah, that's what Curate is. I think the journey of entrepreneurship is not easy, though. Not everyone has a linear journey to it. It will oftentimes send you in a spiral. But in certain cases, what my therapist told me is that sometimes your spiral can also be going up. So it can be dizzying, but it can also be propelling you forward. And I think that's what I've sort of embraced with this entrepreneurship level, that it doesn't always have to be this linear thing, that growth can also look like this upward spiral.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Or it can be going downwards into a rabbit hole. And boy, do we love rabbit holes.
Yeah.
Especially us procrastinators.
Ooh, yeah.
But can we go back to period sex?
Yes.
Because that's the taboo, you know. Tell me how you get around that.
Sorry, Mom, if you're listening. So, yeah, I'm going to be honest. I think I only started navigating period sex when I was 23. It took me about 2 or 3 years since becoming the Minister of Menstruation. It was a topic that I researched. It was a topic that I understood. But for myself, I think there was a lot of unlearning I had to go through, especially in unlearning the own internalized stigma I had with my own period. But what I can tell you from my first experience with it is that, wow, all of the benefits that you read up on period sex are definitely real.
What are they?
They, when they say your symptoms lessen, so the period pain goes away, the flow is lighter, especially if you're me who has a headache and a migraine, that also disappears. It really helps. And I think it's due to the release, like the orgasm that you experience, which is a happy feeling. You're feeling great. That assists with the uterine lining. It also just assists with your period symptoms. And yeah, I think it is a messy affair. I'll be very honest. There's a lot of like setting up that you have to do. Like if you want to put on a towel, if you're worried. I don't even think there is a period smell, but in certain cases, what people have told me is that they always scent a candle just to make it a little bit more romantic and that their brain is not overthinking. There's just a lot of setup that you have to do. But I appreciate my former partner who was very open about it, because I think beyond just me having my own misconceptions, I also was very worried about my partner in that he would probably be like, oh, you want to do this? No, we shouldn't, you know. There are a lot of men who still carry this belief that period blood is a dirty thing, and if their manhood gets a hold of it, it's going to be bad. And it's like, no. It's totally fine. So I think having a supportive partner where you can speak openly about menstrual health and they can support you in every phase, including that phase where you're menstruating. And the irony is that when you're menstruating, you feel even more hornier. I don't get it, but I get it. It's good.
Yeah.
You know, if you have a partner who just doesn't want to speak openly about your period, who makes you feel uncomfortable on your period, you should do what you do with your pad and just wrap them up and throw them away.
I love that. I love that. So what is the taboo? So I'm thinking now, it's got to do with impurity.
It's definitely the period blood.
That the blood makes us impure.
Sure.
Possibly. And so when we become impure, there's that stigma that we are dirty, but it's beyond that dirt. It's just that we're not pure.
I mean, from a religious point of view, I think you can tell me, like, what is menstrual health covered in the Torah in terms of, like, what do they say?
Yeah, so, you can look at it very beautifully. And if you're not listening to it from a positive and open space, it becomes very judgmental, obviously. And but when a woman has her period in Jewish law, the man and woman have to separate.
Yeah.
And the reason for this is because she's not considered impure, but she's considered in a phase of spiritual impurity.
Sure.
There's a lot of justifications, or sometimes it's a justification, but if you don't want to see it as a justification, see it as a very positive way. It's a time once a month where she can be separate from her husband and she can take time out for herself.
Sure.
That for those 12 days, and I'll explain very briefly why it's 12 days in a minute, but for those 12 days, she does not have to have the pressure of being available for him sexually. And so sometimes it's less than 12 days.
Yeah.
And so they have to connect on another level
Okay.
that is not sexual.
Yeah.
They have to connect emotionally, intellectually. They have to spend quality time together without it becoming a sexual experience.
Sure.
And so that is the psychological benefits from separating sexually. And then she goes to a water pool, which called the mikveh, and when she knows that she's no longer menstruating at all, she goes into this ritual bath, and she goes through this experience, and then she can sleep with her husband that night. And the fact that they've been separated for a number of days means the excitement. It's almost like we get together again like we were on our wedding night.
Sure.
You know, the build-up
like a
of
renewal.
that sexual tension and that excitement. Oh, you're going to mikveh tonight, and let's get all excited, you know.
Oh, that's so great.
It really should be like that first night.
Sure.
And the reason why we take 12 days is because generally a period lasts 5 days.
Sure.
And then we need to make sure that there's no period for no blood from the uterus
no
for
spotting.
7 days.
Okay.
No spotting for 7 days afterwards. And also, if you look at your menstrual cycle in terms of reproduction, during those days of the month, when you do come together with your husband, you're the most fertile.
Yeah, that's ovulation, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you do have the 4 phases. So menstruation is the first phase, then you move into the follicular phase where the egg is being developed. Then you go into ovulation where the egg is then traveling down, and then you get into luteal where it's now the low PMS, moody phase. And the religious aspect is so important because I think there's a strong connection to that impurity element. Because from a Christianity, Catholic point of view, the Old Testament speaks about when you should enter the temple, and you shouldn't enter the temple. There's a lot of emphasis on you shouldn't enter the temple when you're sick, when you're physically dirty, or when you're menstruating. It never actually says that when you're menstruating, you're considered impure or dirty, but in fact, it does highlight that when you are menstruating, it's a time in which you need to rest. That because your body's going through this process, like you mentioned, that you should just be taking a time to separate yourself from society to rest. And then we have people that then take that out of context and they make it to be like,
Correct.
Because, you know, it's young girls that are menstruating and that they have this gift of life, let's try and make them feel inferior. There's this incredible menstrual activist from overseas called Chris Bobble, and Chris Bobble said that because we have this blood magic, right, where every single month our bodies just know what to do, and we menstruate and we stop. It can, at certain times, especially when she did like this process tracing thing within pre-agrarian societies, they were seen as these witches, right? That you were able to turn your body on, turn your body off, you're able to bleed and then it'll turn off. That was seen as like this is magic and we don't do well with magic, and therefore we are going to tell you to isolate or not openly tell people that you're on your period. So it's better for yourself that you don't tell society, because what do we do to witches? Right?
Yeah, 100%.
So that was a very fascinating way of understanding exactly where this impurity came from, and that how that has been passed down from generation to generation, because how culture is passed down is you tell your daughter tells their daughter, and so forth and so forth. The education that I got on my menstrual health was education that my mom got from her mom, and therefore. So even in tied with that, the stigmas and the taboos and even the weird things of like when you're on your period, you shouldn't touch milk or you shouldn't be in the kitchen. Those things are passed down, and that is a cultural element, and that is what drives the taboo. So culture even stems within relationships, right? Because when you're marrying, there's a whole culture element of we're marrying to different cultures, what needs to be done, and that expectation of especially menstrual health and hygiene and the bedroom comes into play. Because if a boy child is coming from a clueless background where no one's had the conversation with him, and he's just going off on the assumption of, okay, I'm going off what my bros told me, I'm going off what I've heard on or seen on movies, or the fact that always, sorry, please beep that out. The fact that a specific period company always puts blue blood and their girls just always dancing and happy on their period, but then they can't relate to why their wife is so much in pain. The societal element and perspective of periods versus what it's actually like in relationships, there's a missing gap there, right? So the taboo really stems from religion, I believe, and it also stems from a cultural aspect. Even when we look at it from a menstrual product point of view, there's a lot of communities in South Africa that generally still believe that girls should not use a tampon or a menstrual cup because they need to preserve their virginity, and that when they insert it, it will break their hymen. But what they don't really understand is that the hymen, when you're born with it, as you grow older, it disappears as when you start your period. These are things that people don't know. These are things that people need to know, that when you insert a tampon or a menstrual cup, you're not having sex with these things. They are designed to absorb or collect menstrual blood. And when we are providing this information in the Curate workshops, the girls are like, wow, yeah, you're right. Because we ask these questions. We're like, are you having sex with this? No.
It's all about intention.
Yeah, it's intention. Yeah. So I think even from a period sex point of view, because that's a lot of questions I get from social media. There's a lot of anxiety that women will carry when they're like, I feel very, very frisky when on my period, and I just don't know how to bring it up to my partner. And it's like, okay, firstly, equip yourself with understanding the things that you can do, read up on how people manage it, but also having that conversation open with your partner is super important, because you'd rather want to be with someone who's supportive. I think that's the very important element there, because there's nothing you can do about your menstrual cycle. We even forget that as we finish menstruation, we enter into perimenopause, and then there's menopause. You still need that support carrying you through. So
I love what you're saying about like be prepared. Practically, if you know that you're going to have sex on your period, then get the towel. Light the candle.
Play some music.
Play the music and get into the groove as you are.
Yeah.
And talk. I mean, communication is key, right?
Yeah.
Across the board with any subject. And it's about, hey, honey, it's the time of the month. Are you keen? Would you like to take a little bit of a stay away? And then depending on what you've both decided, you can either go for it or not, but then be prepared. As you said, I love that. You have tissues handy or whatever it is, wet wipes or whatever it is, just to make the experience as less shameful as possible and as more pleasurable as possible.
Exactly. And I say period sex is great because like you already have the menstrual blood as a lubricant.
Exactly. I was saying now.
So
exactly. There's no extra lube.
It's done. Unflows there, good to go. And I think that's strangely enough, I find it more pleasurable. Well, I think in my experience, I found it to be more pleasurable in terms of heightened experience. I was very fascinated how quickly I reached the climax on my period, and that just always gave me a really great experience in terms of the symptoms lessening.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Every time I talk about period sex on a said app, X, I guess I can mention that app. People will always be like, "No, but what do you mean? My partner's worried about this and this and this." Like, well, if you feel that way, if you feel like you have that desire and need, don't cut yourself off. It's the very same thing of like, you enjoy swimming generally. It doesn't mean you should stop swimming when you're on your period. You can still do swimming when you're on your period. You can still work out on your period. You should do whatever you want to do on your period, even if it involves doing another person. Yeah. Just do it. I just think we shouldn't isolate ourselves, because society has conditioned us to say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And it's like, do what you want to do that makes you happy and comfortable on your period. I think that's the most important takeaway. If you feel pressured to like always be productive, because I also fall into this trap of like urgency culture and hyperproductivity, that I must always be also working even on my period. But there's days when the first 2-3 days I can't even function. I can still be productive, but I'm just going to be productive in bed or on my couch. That's just how it's going to work. And so I think people should still also have that form of compassion to themselves on their period as well. There's a beautiful interview we did for the book Flow, the book about menstruation, with a rabbi. And the rabbi was like, if we actually take this, what a period means within a punctuation point of view, it means a full stop. So take that opportunity to rest.
Exactly.
Take that opportunity to self-care. Do all the things that you require, hot baths, yoga, meditation, because your body is literally going through this process. You're transitioning from there was life and there's no longer life. So feed back into yourself and nourish yourself. And that for me was such a critical takeaway. Especially as I just don't genuinely try my best to rest, and I don't, but trying to just have a routine of self-care on my period is so fundamental. And if it even includes intimacy and pleasure, that's fine too.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And the truth is that blood isn't dirty. What is a problem is other infectious sexual diseases. And that's where I think we need to actually draw the line to distinguish between what is sexually dangerous sex and what is not. And period sex is not dangerous. It's clean. The blood is clean. Whereas, if you're going to turn off not having sex because you're on your period, yet you will still sleep around with somebody who has a sexually transmitted disease. Sure. You got to question your principles or the way that you're looking at sex. But yeah, it's been an incredible journey, this one that we have been on. I just wanted to know as well from you if you think that there's anything else. I mean, we've spoken a lot about shame, we've spoken about communication, how important it is to have open conversations with our children. We know that the school is a little bit of is a little bit problematic, but there again, it also is around sex education. So where parents do rely on the school system to educate our children, they're not doing such a great job. Sure. And it's better that we take the matter into our own hands and educate our children confidently and as best as we can, then let them learn from their peers.
Definitely. I agree.
That's dangerous.
There's also a lot of tools that it's easier to get access to this information. And so it's important that parents, guardians are the main resource. And then if children or teenagers want to go somewhere else, they can, but they must always rely on the fact that they can go back home to say, is this true or is this not? Rather than saying, well, this app told me it's true or this TikToker told me that it's true. Like, I think it's important that the power that establishing a safe space in your home will have for your children. Yeah. And I think this is the work that we have to do as parents. It's really, hopefully one day you will be a parent. Let me find myself a baby daddy.
Hopefully. The thing is that we've got to be educating the parents.
Sure.
To find that sweet spot for themselves.
Yes.
Around what am I comfortable within myself? Why do I have this shame and guilt around my own body that is prohibiting me from sharing with my children?
Sure.
So we've got to get them to a place where they can openly talk about sex, sexuality, pleasure, periods, and so on and so forth, which is a hard job because I see that on my couch here. It's hard when you're dealing with a woman who's disconnected from her sexuality because of trauma, childhood trauma, or guilt and shame around her past experiences, and then she needs to be able to have these conversations with her daughter.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
It is.
And I respect those experiences. I really do.
And I mean, if parents are listening, they can rely on Curate as a tool. We do host workshops for schools, for corporates, but we can also adapt our workshops for settings as well. If parents want to have like a period party element, we are happy. Our facilitators are equipped in adapting to those environments. But we also do have a book called Menstruation Station. It's a children's animated book where the parents can equip themselves with that information first and then read it with their children first and after. I think, for me, building that period positive society really looks beyond like what other tools are we leaving behind that is possible. So a parent can leave their book with their child, and their child, as they grow up, can leave that book with their child. And that's how we then change that narrative.
Love it. Love it. There's one last thing I wanted to ask you.
Sure.
When I met you, you were 21, I think, maybe 22.
Sure.
Maybe 23. It was a long time ago. It was a long time. It was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And there you were in it. You were in this work to win it. You were just as passionate as I hear you today. You were then also the Minister of Menstruation. I mean, it's not something that you've grabbed this role and you've gone with it. How much progress do you think that there has been? And how much more? I mean, I can even from my own job, I can see it's massive work to still cover. But how much progress do you think that you've made?
Wow. I think, from a Curate perspective, more beneficiaries have been targeted. We've definitely been in a space now where we're also working with corporates because corporates realize that their employees menstruate. So they also need to have a wellness element to their programs, and they need to have policies that speak to period products in the bathroom, etc. So we've also pivoted in that sense. I think from an individual point of view, I've become a bit more aware in terms of what it means to constantly be on the go. Back then, I think there was a constant need to always show people that I'm busy and have this performative culture of like, I'm always busy. But now as I get older, I'm like, being busy is good, but I want to work smart, not work hard. Because for me, rest is as fundamental as the work I put in, but I have to be restful. I have to be rested. It's the same concept when your phone battery is low, you have to charge it so it can be a phone for the rest of the day. And the thing for me, I can't effectively give to the workshops, I can't effectively lead and mentor my team if I'm always constantly exhausted. So that shift has happened. And I think for me, that is very successful because oftentimes people will be like, success is what I drive, what I'm wearing. But for me, it's like what I'm feeling, what I love to do. And I've realized I love doing the work, but if I want to keep this sustaining itself, I need to also be mindful of how much I'm pouring myself into and having those boundaries to say, I'm not available today. I don't have the capacity, has been a big shift. Because before I'd always be like, I can do this. Yes, I can do that. But I'd always be so exhausted. So that for me has been an incredible shift beyond the work and the impact that Curate does. I think for myself as an individual, as an entrepreneur, I've had a more human element to how I do my work. And that for me has been incredible. Yeah.
Awesome. And I wish our listeners could hear your beautiful smile, your lovely energy, and that really, I'm so enjoying chatting to you because your energy is all over your face. It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
And I just thank you so much again for making the time to come and speak to us.
Thank you for having me. I think we need to tag team and trying to find a way in which we can have sexual and reproductive health content for younger audiences that is friendly, accessible, and we'll find a way.
Yeah.
Let this be the launch pad for that conversation.
We started this about 3 years ago.
We did.
So this is the second meeting.
Yes.
And, everything happens in threes, and we'll be, well, maybe not before.
Hopefully.
3 years, 4 years.
Hopefully not. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Candice. And I would like our listeners out there to watch out for this episode with the Minister of Menstruation on Spotify and YouTube. And stay tuned for the next episode on Totally Not Taboo.
Period.